Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Alice Springs. For how many people this is the first visit to Alice Springs? Well, welcome, and please take advantage of this fantastic, I'll call it a city. It's not really a city, it's a town, but it's a fantastic place. I first came to Alice Springs in 1984 as a delegate to the Apex National Convention, and I didn't really think for one moment that I'd be sort of living in the Northern Territory and coming here on a regular basis. But the next visit was 2006 when my predecessor asked me to, or he asked the Commissioner in New South Wales whether I could come and do some work in evaluating some systems in both Darwin and Alice Springs Prison. And I remember going up onto Anzac Hill, sitting up on the lookout there, looking over the town, and I thought, what a great place to be, what a great place to live. And even at that stage, I had no idea that I was going to be living in the Northern Territory a little bit over 18 months later. But Wendy, I haven't actually been a commissioner for 6 years. We've been a department now in our own right since the 4th of September last year. Prior to that, I was the Executive Director of Correctional Services, which sat in the Department of Justice. But before I was appointed to that role, I came to the Territory as the Director of Custodial Operations, and my predecessor, I met him when he first came out from Denmark, and he told me about the vision that he had for the Northern Territory Correctional Services. And I was coming to the Northern Territory. My wife and I have 5 girls, and I think that's why I'm so comfortable about having so many women around me in my head office. All my senior people, the majority are women, and I sort of take advice from females very well. I think it's because I've grown up in a household of so many women. But 4 of our girls were living in the Northern Territory, so Margaret and I used to come on a fairly regular basis, and I used to meet and see Jens, and then the Commissioner in New South Wales didn't really travel to the national meetings, so I was lucky enough to attend on his behalf. And Jens used to always say, why don't you come and work for me in the Northern Territory? And my response was, because you can't afford me. Because I said, you can't pay me what I'm getting, and I don't particularly want to give that up. But I reached a point in New South Wales where I thought, money's really not important, and I was at a conference in 2006 with Jens, and the same old ritual took place. Why don't you come and work for me? And I said, well, what do you got to offer? And he said, well, I'm looking for somebody to come over as the General Manager of Community Corrections. And I said, I'd love to do that. And he said, well, okay, we'd better go through a bit of a process, though. He said, I just can't appoint you. So we went through the traditional merit appointment selection, or whatever you call it, and I decided I was coming to the Territory. I gave notice. And as I was about to walk out the door, Jens rang and said, well, mate, I've changed my mind. I'm now going to put you in as Director of Custodial Operations. I was a little disappointed because I was really looking forward to coming to the Northern Territory, working with community corrections. And but as it turned out, it worked out better for me. And I'll go back to 2003 with community corrections, where in New South Wales, the Commissioner of the day asked me to relieve as the Senior Assistant Commissioner in Community Corrections. Katrina McComish was the Senior Assistant Commissioner and was taking 10 months long service leave, and I was asked to take that role. And I think that was one of the most, I'll say the second most highlight, second biggest highlight of my career. I think the biggest highlight was coming to the Northern Territory. But for me, going into community corrections after so many years as a custodial officer, I had some great reservations about it. But going in, it was a fantastic experience. And I'll recall a little story, as Narelle Jeffries is here, but I remember going to Dubbo with Narelle's regional director at the time, and Narelle was the district manager, and Phil and I, we turned up, and the staff turned on a morning tea, and all Narelle's staff were sitting around the table, and they made me feel so welcome, and I thought, this is fantastic. So Narelle and Phil and I went and had some lunch, and I said, look, why don't I take you down to the Dubbo police cells and you can meet my staff? Because at the time, my substantive role was the Chief Superintendent in charge of security investigations across the state, and I had responsibility for the police cells and corrective services. They operate in New South Wales 15 24-hour police cell complexes. And so Narelle and Phil and I went to the police cells, and unlike my welcome at community corrections, what we got met with the door was, are you cutting our overtime out? It wasn't, g'day sir, these visitors, it was, are you cutting our overtime? And I think I walked away from that experience thinking, you know, there seems to be more satisfaction in community corrections than what there is in the prison side of things. And I have to say that I've strengthened that view, as the years have passed. And my staff here in the Territory have heard me say this many times, that the future for corrections is not in prisons. The future for corrections is in community corrections. It's about getting people out of custody and keeping people back in the community. And in the Northern Territory, we're building a new prison, 1,048 beds. In fact, at this point in time, it'll probably be the biggest prison in Australia. By 2017, we'll be probably overtaken by Victoria's Ravenhall project, but I'm not really proud to be a commissioner of an organisation that can say I have the biggest prison in Australia. But it's costing $495 million. And there's a lot of features in that prison that I am happy about and I'm very proud about, and I can gloat amongst my peers that we have some innovation in our prison that's not available, I think, in any other facility that I'm aware of. But that facility is going to cost the taxpayers of the Northern Territory $165,000 a day for the next 30 years. And the reality is that the way our prison population is increasing in the Northern Territory, by the time we open that prison in July 2014, it's highly likely that it will be full. Alice Springs will be full. The Barclay Work Camp will be full. And so we've got to do something about diverting people out of custody, not keeping them in custody. So I'll go back to what I said. I think that the future for us is in community corrections, and I'm committed to that as the Commissioner of Corrections in the Northern Territory. I think the way forward for us is in community corrections and in our juvenile justice area. We are fortunate in the Territory that we have responsibility for juvenile justice as well as community corrections and the custodial. And that was a decision that was made by the government and the minister when they came into office in August last year. That decision hasn't sit well with a number of NGOs and other people in the youth space in particular, because they don't think it's appropriate that youth justice should sit within corrective services. I disagree with that, but I am determined that we split the youth justice side from the adult correctional side, so there's a clear difference between what we're doing. And at the moment we are working to develop a youth justice framework that sits across the Northern Territory. I'm opposed to building a new youth justice correctional centre until we finish that youth justice framework, because I think custody should be certainly the last thing that we worry or try to do with youth, but recognising also that there's a group of people out there that need to be put into custody. I'm very proud of what we're doing in the Northern Territory. I think there's some innovations that we're doing here that are ahead of corrections probably nationally and internationally. We're the first of the Australian jurisdictions to introduce no smoking in the prisons. And whilst we did get a fair bit of criticism from different quarters, we've got a lot of accolades from people in moving this forward. And the no smoking was not just about no smoking, it's about a healthy lifestyle policy. So we're looking at this as a healthy lifestyles program where we're encouraging people to think about their eating habits, and even our canteen activities in the prisons are geared towards healthy lifestyles. 12 months ago we reduced sugar and salt in some of the catering options, and then the no smoking took effect, and this is the 4th month. And despite all of the claims that we would see fires in Darwin and Alice Springs, the only fires that I think we've had is where there's been a few prisoners tried to smoke tea leaves and toilet paper, and a few recalcitrant staff that think that because they're not doing time they should be entitled to smoke. But we stick to the script that no smoking is very good. And I have to say, I was telling somebody yesterday, I was coming out of Darwin prison a few weeks ago, and one of the female officers pulled me up and said, "Oh, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Middlebrook, for the no smoking policy." And I said, "Oh, well, that's a change." And usually people are telling us why we shouldn't be stopping staff, in particular, smoking. And she said, when you introduced and announced that we were going to introduce no smoking, she said, my husband and I, who are both very heavy smokers, we both smoked about a packet a day each. She said, we decided that we'd give up. We took advantage of the no smoking treatment, and we started to save the money that we were spending on tobacco. And she said, we've now saved up enough money to take the kids on a holiday to New Zealand. And as I walked out, I thought, well, that's a positive, that's good. But I think at the end of the day, it was the right decision. Or I know at the end of the day it was the right decision. And it's one that I think we'll see benefit over in the next few years. because the health of our offenders in the Northern Territory is very poor, and whatever we can do while we've got them in our custody, I think we have a responsibility to do. But the focus really is on, here today, is the community corrections, and there's so much that's actually happening. We have a very strong team here in Alice Springs, and we have a very strong team in Tennant Creek, Catherine, and then certainly in the Darwin, the two offices in Darwin. And we have presences on Tiwi Islands, at Wadair, and at Grid Island and Nullumboy. These guys do a remarkable job. And the thing that amazes me is that when you look at the Territory, it's a big space. And when you look at the remote communities that our people travel to, I'm always amazed that, you know, they go without argument, they travel dirt, dusty roads, stay in a swag, and it never can. I'm never ceased to be amazed at the dedication and the commitment. So I thank them sincerely for what they do. But again, I say that community corrections, I think, is the future for us, and I think that's why Paccoa should take a very important place in the development of community corrections across Australia. I'm aware that over the last few years that I have had a colleague or two at the Commissioner level that haven't been as supportive as probably what they could have been. But I think the time is right now for Paccoa to consider, you know, reapproaching the Correctional Administrators Council to see whether in fact you can get a bit more strength and support from the CSAC group. I think the commitment would be there, and I'd like to see, Wendy, something that would come to CSAC from Paccoa, because I think that there'd be quite an interest in the current administrators that I call my colleagues and my friends. I think they would be more than happy to assist with you. But a little bit of information about the Territory. We have got a growing prison population. Today we have something like 1,492 people in custody. That's against the capacity in our prison system of 1,204 beds. So, you know, we've been struggling for some time, and we'll, even with a new prison opening next year. But we are doing some, I think, some very innovative things. We've got the Barclay Work Camp in the Tennant Creek and the Barclay area, and again, the custodial staff and the community correction staff work very closely together. And I think that's one of the things that makes it such a success, because these guys act as a team. We're also looking at working closely with communities. The Minister has nominated a number of communities where we're working with community members, land councils, to try and establish a partnership where the council provides or the community provides the infrastructure, and that corrections can provide the support, and we will then pay that community to look after the offenders. They may do 2/3 in custody and 1/3 back in the community. The Minister calls it sentence to community, and alongside the sentence to a job program that we're currently running, we're convinced it'll meet our obligations under the Deaths in Custody Royal Commission, and also I think it provides an opportunity for local employment, an opportunity for people to see that punishment is being delivered when people do the wrong thing. A couple of years ago I had an experience which was a bit of a, you know, people tell you have a light bulb moment. Well, a couple of years ago I had, in one of our remote communities, we had a community probation and parole officer, which is an entry-level Indigenous person that comes into corrections. And that person was also elected to one of the local shire groups, and so he was running 2 jobs. He was a community corrections employee, and he was a shire counsellor. And on his way back from a shire meeting, he introduced alcohol to his community, and he was picked up by the police and charged. My initial reaction in Darwin was to dismiss him, because I thought, how could I have anybody representing the department that's been charged and be dealing with people for the same sorts of things that he'd just done? But the community started to petition me. I got over 200 signatures on one petition to say that the community didn't want me to dismiss him. So I decided that the General Manager of Community Corrections and I would fly out and meet with the community. And it was a difficult community in that we had 4 different community meetings that we had to attend. And the first was a meeting with a number of women. And I felt for this guy, because these ladies really got stuck into him. And they really brought to his notice that he had brought shame on his family, shame on the community. But they then turned to me and said, but we want him to stay as a community corrections officer. And that was repeated on four times. And at the last meeting, one of the older men, we were having a cup of tea, and he said, you guys are crazy. He said, you know, you take our young men, you take them over to Berrima, you feed them up, you fatten them up, you fix their teeth, and you send them home with a new pair of joggers, and they've done the wrong thing. And I was coming home on the plane thinking, the community don't see prison as a punishment. The community don't accept that putting people in prison is, you know, paying back what they've done wrong. And I thought the way that we've got to move forward in the Territory is keeping people in community, close to community, and letting the community see that they're giving something back, they're giving some reparation back for what they've done. So our commitment in the Northern Territory is not keeping people in custody. It's hampered by the fact that the government's introduced mandatory sentencing laws and some tougher requirements, which is going to raise the prison population. But I have a personal commitment that I want to mothball 200 beds in that new prison when it's open. Now, that might not be achievable in the next few years, but I think with sentenced to a job, getting people into employment, I think I might be able to realise my commitment. And I'd like to think I could do that before I retired from the service. And some of the things that give me heart to think that I can do this is that our recidivism rate in the Northern Territory is running at 52%, not something to be proud of. We're locking people up here at 859 per 100,000 compared to a national average of about 170. But we've been keeping some statistics over the last 4 years of the prisoners that we've been releasing on the pre-release program. This is guys getting into work and getting them a job so they don't come back to custody. And the recidivism rate amongst that group is 18%. So I'm convinced that we can link that with some housing, we can keep that employment going, then we'll go a long way to dropping that 52%. But we need a strong community corrections force to be able to support that as well. So look, I welcome the opportunity to come to Paccoa. I thank you for coming together. I would again say, Wendy, I'd like to see Paccoa on the agenda at CSAC. I think that would be very good. It would be refreshing to see something like Paccoa on rather than some of the issues that have been on the CSAC agenda for the last 10 years that I've been attending CSAC. But I think, though, that all ministers that have attended the ministerial conferences and all the CEOs of corrections across Australia have a real vested interest in community corrections. I think there's a real interest there. I think there's a recognition that the community corrections is the way of the future, that communities can't keep building prisons. So welcome to Alice Springs, welcome to the conference. I hope you have a great couple of days. I know the staff here will look after you, and I really look forward to getting feedback from these few days. Thank you very much.